Welcome to the podcast Compels You, the podcast where we are given categories by our cursed AI chatbot, forced to find movies that fit in those categories, and share them with you fine folks. I'm Bill, and with me is my co-host Stacy. How are you doing, Stacy?
I'm doing pretty good. I have a retraction and an amendment from two previous episodes.
Which movie was that?
The retraction is from The Wicker Man, and I shouldn't have mouthed off without looking up facts and figures. So I have a retraction from The Wicker Man, and that is I said that Time Magazine put God is Dead on the cover after The Wicker Man, but it was actually 1966. So it was 7 years before The Wicker Man. I was wrong about that, and I am sorry. That's what a retraction is, right?
I think we can collectively forgive you.
It's my first retraction.
Just
So
this time, though, yes.
so how many do we get, like one each, and then we're done?
Yeah, it's like a mulligan if you're a golfer.
And then I have an amendment, which I know that's what it's called in the Constitution. I'm not sure what it's called in the podcast, so I'm just making that up. But we talked about the Black Coat's Daughter in that episode not making so very much money at the box office. We talked a lot about it, actually, and we speculated about why that might be. Later, I found out that it was only released on 26 screens. So that is why it didn't make very much money.
That makes sense. How much money did it make? Do you remember? Was it like, it was five digits, right? I think.
Well, I mean, how many decimal places do you want?
Oh, that's fair. We'll say tens of thousands, I believe it
Yeah,
was.
it
Yeah.
may have been a couple tens of thousands, something like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. So we were doing it a disservice by saying that it didn't perform well, given the
Right.
circumstances.
Right. And I think we were kind about it, but like even more to our point now, it wasn't an inherent defect. It was just the circumstances.
So what you're saying is everyone should run out and watch The Black Coat's Daughter and then listen to our episode because both are awesome.
They could listen to the first part, and then as soon as they get to Dark Fact of the Day and finish listening to that, then they know that they have to go see the movie or else it's going to be spoiled. So you could do it either way.
Well said.
Thanks. Have you seen any good movies lately?
That was such like an official thing though, like the amendment and the retraction. I feel like, yeah.
And now I like to read the minutes from the last podcast.
We're now like easing back into the informalness. I like
I
this.
would like the treasurer to give a statement.
I will step in the treasurer's shoes. I have seen a few good movies actually. Some really not strange, some horror subgenres that I don't normally watch. So the first was a horror comedy called Cooties. Have you heard of Cooties?
I think I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen it.
Okay. It's a horror comedy with starring Elijah Wood and Rainn Wilson from The Office. And
Nice.
amongst others, there's a few other notable people in it too. And it's an infection movie about a bunch of kids at a school getting infected and, things get out of control. It was a good movie. Not great. To me, I have a hard time with horror comedies. I feel like to
Mm.
me, they just land as comedies with just like a few elements of horror mixed in. They don't scare me at all. They're not terribly frightening. So I really more categorize them as comedies. So it doesn't really fit my mind as a horror movie. With that being said, it was entertaining enough. I made it to the end. That's one of my litmus tests. So that was okay. Then I watched a movie that I've been wanting to watch for a long time called Bone Tomahawk. Have you seen that?
No, but I've certainly heard a buzz.
Okay. And there's the buzz you probably heard were like certain scenes being very, I don't know, gory or
Very,
really kind
very,
of
very
intense, we'll
something.
say. Yeah. So the subgenre on this one, I think, would be considered like Western horror, which again, I don't think I've ever seen another Western horror movie that I can think of. But this, like I said, with this being a movie I was really looking forward to, I think my expectations were really high. It's got like a really great cast, and the last part of it definitely delivers. It's like the last act is fantastic, but the rest of it is a very slow moving movie without a whole
Hmm.
lot to keep me engaged. So I will say that. I don't know if I'd recommend it necessarily, but I don't know. The ending's pretty great. And then the third one, this is probably the most like horror adjacent movie which is called Prey. Do you remember this movie? This is a prequel to Predator.
No, I don't.
Okay. Did you ever see Predator, the original from
Yes.
19? Okay.
I don't think I was aware that there was a prequel.
So this came out, I think 2022, not that
Oh,
long ago. And I've actually listened to other podcasts who have argued whether or not like Predator is really a horror movie or, because obviously it's definitely an action movie. Like that's first and foremost, it's an action movie. But you get the Predator character who's very much like it's like a monster,
monster.
like in a monster movie.
It's definitely horror.
And it's definitely hunting people down and, there's kind of all that, instilling fear in them. But Prey was super it was a super good movie. So it actually takes place way back, well before the original, and it's a Native American tribe who comes in contact with the Predator, basically, 200 years before the original movie. And so they're trying to
Oh,
figure out, and all of the characters are actually played by Native American actors and actresses, which is really cool.
thank
And
goodness.
it's handled like super well. I was reading all the trivia behind it, and like the director was like super respectful of Native American customs and all of that, and like making sure he got everything right. And it shows. It's like a great action. I'm not huge on action movies generally speaking, but like a lot of great action scenes. The CGI was done really tastefully, where it's not like a lot of movies nowadays that I can't stand, where everything's CGI'd. It's a
Yeah.
very like natural looking movie. And the main character, I don't remember her name. It's a very young Native American actress, and she is just fantastic in this role. She just plays like just the badass, protagonist who ends up, you know, not to spoil anything, but she ends up kind of being the hero of the movie. So it's nice to see non-male, you know, your typical action movie stars ending up as the protagonist, which I thought was really
Yeah.
nice. And it wasn't done in like a, girl power type of thing. It felt natural. It was like a very natural movie, I would say. So I would definitely recommend that one. And then I guess one smaller thing I watched was a series on Prime, Amazon Prime called Them. It's a horror series.
Oh, I've seen season one.
Interesting. So I only watched the first episode because I saw that it was an anthology series. And for some reason, my mind took that as each episode was going to be a different thing. But
No,
apparently it's a
it's
season by
yeah.
season, kind of like American Horror Story. Is that more similar?
It must be. I didn't even know that. I
Okay.
just knew that there was one story arc for the first season.
Gotcha. Because I went into the
So,
first episode thinking everything's going to wrap up in this episode because like they're going to move on to a different story, but it didn't. And it's kind of hard to watch. It was a 1950s, I want to say,
oh,
somewhere in there. And it's a black
yeah.
family moving into the white suburbs, and all of that and all the, subtle and not
Yep,
so subtle
yep.
racism. And yeah, just kind of a bummer to watch. And I don't know. I may end up watching the rest of it. Do you think it's worth watching the rest of the first season?
I do.
Okay.
I think it's really well done.
Okay. That's what I was watching. What have you been watching, Stacy?
So, as promised, I saw Abigail and I thought it was a lot of fun. Like you said, it's kind of hard to have a comedy horror, comedy core. That's what I almost said. Then I said it again for emphasis.
No, it's
Uh,
real.
what's a thing?
It's a thing now.
Okay, it's going on the list. No, but I thought that it still managed to land like a few scares, despite the fact that it was a comedy. It was also a heist movie. I mean,
Hmm.
to the T. So that was fun. Apparently, a lot of people didn't go see it because they thought that the trailer gave the whole thing away. And I heartily disagree with that. And I think y'all should see it.
Duly noted. It sounds like it has a lot of elements in it. I didn't know that there was like a heist in it, for example. So
And it has Dan
interesting.
Stevens in it.
Oh, I'm not gonna lie. Dan Stevens might be like my man crush. I think
He's kind of dreamy.
I mean, his blue eyes are the most vibrant thing in this movie that we're going to be reviewing shortly. But
That's
anyway,
totally true. 100%. Um, I also saw Dawn of the Dead 4K restoration on the big screen, which is one of my favorite movies of all times.
I'm assuming the original.
The original. Yeah.
Nice.
It's amazing how much comedy, so much comedy and tragedy for that matter, they pack into that movie. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to see the restoration and see it in the theater because it seems like the producer, whoever owns the rights to the movie, like they don't care about money.
Hmm.
And apparently, I don't know all the story, but it's very difficult to even get this movie on a screen nowadays. Do
Hmm.
you know how I got to see it on a screen?
No, tell me.
I am lucky enough that I live near an Alamo Draft House where they care enough about movies and audiences to go to the trouble of tracking down the rights of these things and figuring out how to make these things happen. The Alamo Draft House is the best movie theater in America, and hopefully they will be a sponsor of the podcast Compels You one day in the near future. Another thing they do is they have brunch showings of older movies, sometimes correlated with the theme. For example, this Sunday, which is Mother's Day, there I dated the episode. I'm going to their brunch showing of Hitchcock's original Psycho in
Oh,
honor of Mother's
cool.
Day. I mean, perfect, right?
That's awesome.
Beyond that, I saw Dream Scenario. That was an okay movie, not a horror movie. It
Is
tries to
that
say
with,
something about, yeah, Nicolas Cage.
yeah, Nicolas Cage. Okay.
It tries to make a message about cancel culture, and I'm not even sure what it says because I was in it for the scary scenes, and those were fun. So I had tickets to go see Tarot, and then there was like street flooding. I didn't go see it. Heard it wasn't good.
Yeah, I think the headline I saw was, "Did AI make this movie?" So
Oh, hilarious. Now I kind of want to see it.
yeah, I know it could be, maybe it could be good bad if nothing else.
I saw near and dear to my heart 1965's Invasion of the Astro Monster, a Godzilla movie.
Oh,
As I think
cool.
I've mentioned to you, Godzilla is my favorite monster. Some people argue that kaiju are not horror movies, but that is because they are wrong. This was a great movie. Soon I'll be seeing I Saw the TV Glow. I have tickets for that, and I think that's it, besides Psycho on Mother's Day. I did see
Wow.
some new trailers. Quick rundown of the trailers. I saw one time, it's completely a surprise, the trailer for Beetlejuice, the new one. Um,
Nice.
and it looks freaking adorable. Oh my God, that's all I can say.
I got all the feels when I saw that trailer. It's like spot on. I mean, like they redid the house to like look exactly like it. And who plays Wednesday? Is it Jenny Ortega?
Yeah,
Jenna
Jenna.
Ortega?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, everything looks like spot. I'm really excited. When I first heard they were making it, I'm like, really? We're doing that? And then I started, seeing the production stills, and I'm like, oh, they got a good group.
I also saw the trailer for Speak No Evil, the American remake. Yet another American remake of a foreign movie that's only 2 years old. And this one was mostly in English anyway. I mean, please tell me, why does this need to be made?
Money, 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 money.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's the answer. Okay, and I saw the trailer for In a Violent Nature, which I immediately contacted you about. Super scary
Yes.
looking slasher, super scary.
Hmm.
Scary trailer. Definitely sounds like something you would enjoy, Bill. Have you seen the trailer yet?
Yes, I watched it as soon as you sent it to me. And what was the tagline? There was something about it being a or ambient. Was ambient the word they used, or there was some word they used to? There's some sort of horror. I'll have to look it up later.
It's
It
been
caught
too
me though.
long. That
Yeah,
memory has
or
been erased.
yeah, my brain is gone after this week. But anyway, yeah, no, I'm pumped about that. That one's good. Is that a A24 film?
I don't remember.
I just assume every horror movie's an A24 film
We
now,
could
but
we could say it is, and then next time we could do a retraction if it turns out to be wrong. I've learned the secret.
absolutely. Our
Yeah.
attraction sections can be very long.
So this is actually our second part of our two-part series on movies that take place at least in part at sea and have to do with cults. I also just remembered today that I so cleverly gave this two-parter the title Surf and Sacrifice. And then I forgot to say it last time. So I'll say it again. Surf
Surf
and
and
sacrifice.
sacrifice.
So nice. We said it twice. Anyhow, in part one, we talked about the Wicker Man. This week, we're discussing Apostle from 2018, a gothic folk horror reimagining of the Wicker Man that tackles some of the same themes of isolation, fanaticism, clash between old world religions and new cults, but with its own Gothic Welsh twist. And if you're not sure what Gothic means, that's okay because no one does. I mean, I think it means turn up the brightness on your TV or you're not going to be able to tell what the fuck is happening. But, let's not obsess over taxonomy. This movie is brought to you by the good people of Wales, especially Welsh-born writer, director, producer Gareth Evans. Evans' major film credits both begin and end in the 20 teens, as far as I can tell. He is best known for the Raid movies, which I haven't seen, but they're very popular. So I could only speculate that they are about pest control. As for his horror work, he is credited as the writer director of the Safe Haven segment of VHS 2 2013, which, if you're not familiar with the VHS franchise, these movies are horror anthologies in the found footage subgenre. Gareth also executive produced Killers 2014, which sounds way more disturbing than Apostle and also gets a slightly higher rating on IMDb.
Hmm.
So, I think maybe I want to see that.
Yeah.
He's not a filmmaker with a lot of big credits to his name, either within horror or without. Had you seen anything by him before?
No, not at all. And that's actually funny. I think all of our directors have pretty much been, they haven't had a whole lot of credits, I think, up to this point. All the films we've done, there hasn't been a lot of prolific directors,
Interesting.
right?
Maybe there's something afoot with the evil AI.
No, but I've not seen any of those other movies, but they sound good. I'm into it.
Apostle stars elder millennial, which I just like to say, elder millennial Dan Stevens as the protagonist, Thomas. Dan Stevens is English, and I first knew him as Matthew Crawley long ago in Downton Abbey, which I watched with my grandparents. And wow, is this just method acting? Is this makeup magic? Is this actual wizardry? But he does not look anything like Cousin Matthew in this movie. He looks really rough and dark and shifty eyed, like a laudanum addict. Like I said, I just saw him in Abigail as a character of Frank, and like literally same thing now that I'm thinking about it. He like completely physically transformed into that character.
It's funny. I know him from have you seen The Guest? It's
Have
it's considered a horror movie, I would say.
is it
It's
recent and was streaming?
yeah, yeah, at some point. It's like a love letter to like John Carpenter's music, and it's just it's he plays a
Oh, nope, I was thinking of a
humanoid.
different movie.
Yeah, no, he's
Okay,
great in it, but he plays like a very hunky version of himself.
that's fun.
He basically plays an army guy who's just ripped and like his blue eyes are just sparkling, and it's a really good movie actually. But that's what I think of him. I never saw Downton Abbey, so never saw that version of him.
Downton Abbey's not horror. I watched it because I love my grandparents. Um,
Oh,
may
that's
they
sweet.
rest in peace. But
Hmm.
um, Frank in Abigail is really a fun character. He's an ex cop, and like Dan Stevens does that like spot on. If you didn't know him, you would think he was just made to play that kind of character, like typecast kind of thing.
Hmm.
I know that he's been in a lot of non-horror, so I looked into his horror credits, and they include a Frankenstein TV miniseries and a made-for-TV Dracula movie, both about 20 years ago. 2012 horror comedy that I've never seen, Vamps, gotta see that. And The
Hmm.
Rental in 2020, which is what I thought you were talking about. I have
No, I
seen
did see
that.
The Rental though too. That's kind of a strange movie. I think Allison
All
Brie is in
right.
that, and the guy from The Bear. I can't think of his name.
Yeah. And he's also, this is so exciting. He's also in Cuckoo, which comes out in August, and it looks absolutely wild. Bill, have you seen the trailer for that?
No, I'm excited though. I get all
Oh
my
my
trailer
God,
suggestions
go
from
see
you.
it right now after the
I
podcast
will.
recording.
Oh, after I shouldn't stop right now and just okay.
I mean, hey, nobody would know if we stopped right now and you watched it. Apostle also stars Lucy Boynton, whom we remember, don't we, Bill, for her role as Rose in The Black Coat's Daughter
Yeah,
2015.
it's our first. Is it our first alumni with, or what do we call her? Like Hall of Fame, I guess.
We could say alum. That's sort of like the short, like gender neutral,
Oh,
because
that's true. Okay.
it's a Latin word, so you'd have to say alumna, and then
Hmm.
everyone's like, "What are you saying?" Because no one actually does it right anyway. So alum, that's what I say.
Fair enough. Our first alum.
She has starred in a handful of horror movies, but my fun fact for tonight is dun dun dun. Lucy Boynton was supposed to play Proust Barbie, a small role for a very clever joke in Greta Gerwig's Barbie 2023. Highly recommend, but sadly, her scene was cut. You know why her scene was cut?
No.
Literally, because test audiences were too stupid to get the joke.
Ah,
Kids these days, I tell ya, reading is fundamental. Apostle also stars Bill Milner, who only other major horror credit is in The Lodgers 2017. Have you seen this, Bill?
no. Now this guy looked very familiar, but he was not who I thought he was when I looked him up on IMDb.
This might be like just my opinion, man, but The Lodgers is like one of the weirdest, ickiest horror movies that I think is peddled to mainstream, like non-Gordo audiences. And I
Hmm.
won't spoil it, except, no, you know what? I will spoil it. The twist, everybody, is incest. That's it. And I promise you, I did you a favor because I saved you from having to see it.
Yeah, not a big fan of that theme.
Next, also appearing in Apostle is Welsh actor Mark Lewis Jones with quite the theater background. You can kind of see like there's a lot of theatrics in this movie. He's played a handful of horror characters, including in video games Castlevania Lord of Shadow 2 and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which just makes him sound like a fun guy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He's super fun in this movie.
And appearing as the adorable Fionn is the adorable Christine Froseth, a very busy young Norwegian American model turned actor, perhaps best known as a titular character in the 2022 Hulu series Looking for Alaska. Alaska is a person. She also
Hmm.
appeared in the 2019 Netflix series The Society, which I don't know anything about, but
No, me
we
either.
live in a society. I mean, we've also got Paul Higgins, best known as a British TV actor, and Michael Sheen, another Welsh actor with a solid theater background, and then a long, varied film resume beginning in the 20 aughts.
Did you see Michael Sheen's picture on IMDb?
Yes.
It is crazy how different he looks in that picture. I don't know if he like transformed for this movie or something, but I had to do a double take. I'm like, is that the right person?
I think they've transformed him for a lot of movies. He's played Tony Blair. He
Oh, I
he
could see
was
that.
he was Frost in Frost v Nixon. He was in the Neutron. He's been in a Woody Allen movie, two Twilight movies, but we won't make fun of him for that. Or maybe
Jeez.
we will a little bit. But he's probably best known now for his role as Aziraphale in Good Omens,
Hmm.
which I have read but not seen. Apostle premiered at Fantastic Fest 2018 and went straight to Netflix in October of that year. Content warning. In addition to our regular content warning in the show notes, in this episode in particular, we discuss a movie that contains a fair bit of violence and gore, including some imprisonment, torture, abuse, and gory violence against a pregnant person. Not all of it on screen, though, and some disturbing animal deaths. Do you think that covers it, Bill?
Yeah, that encompasses everything I had and then some.
So I like to tell you a little about this movie just to introduce it. Then Bill's going to take over and I'll just take a little nap. Uh, so let me set the scene for you. The year is 1905. Thomas is a troubled drug addict with a limited backstory who travels to a remote Welsh island concealing his identity on a mission to rescue his sister Jennifer, who's been kidnapped by a mysterious cult demanding a ransom for her release. As Thomas, attempting to pass as a cult member, winds his way ever deeper into the central mystery of this movie, he discovers even more mysteries, political intrigue, and would you say a great many subplots? So many subplots, some of which are better explained than others. Have you seen this movie before, Bill?
I have not. I've never even heard of this movie. I'm sure I probably passed it on Netflix multiple times, but the thumbnail never dragged me in. Sadly, I do not have my three things I thought I'd see in this movie because I watched this immediately after finishing The Wicker Man. I was on like a roll of like island cults, and I'm like, let's keep it rolling. So I went right into it. But no, I have no history with this movie at all. How about you?
I started this movie on Netflix sometime in 2018, like when it came out. And eventually I finished it like a year or two ago. All I have to say about that is I feel like it might be time for Dark Fact of the Day.
Dark Fact.
Today's Dark Fact sheds light on our protagonist's fondness for laudanum, a concoction of 10% powdered opium mixed with alcohol, prized for its pain-relieving properties. Widely popular in the late 19th century, laudanum was prescribed to alleviate a range of ailments including coughs, rheumatism, and even quote-unquote women's troubles. Shockingly, it was also administered as a sedative for infants and young children, tragically resulting in numerous deaths. By the late 1800s, women comprised over 60% of opium addicts, which I thought was kind of an interesting stat. During this time, towards the late 1800s, aspirin emerged as a safer alternative for pain relief, leading to a decline in the use of opium. So that is your dark fact of the day. And I think that truly is a pretty dark fact. I mean, people giving opium to infants.
I was hoping that the Dark Fact of the Day would be about laudanum. And now I just want to know, can I go to the doctor and complain that I have rheumatism? Maybe he'll give me some laudanum.
He'll give you a tincture. I love that. I love the idea of a tincture. You just get a little bottle with a dropper, drop a little bit on your tongue, and you're good to go.
We call it rheumatism from now on. The way that you're saying the vowel is exactly how Germans would say it. So I just think
I am
it's like
German, actually. My middle name is
hilarious.
Helmut.
No way.
Yes. My name would actually be Wilhelm if it were shoved together.
I'm going to ask to see your license.
Anyway, we've reached the point in the show where we are going to get into a spoilerific plot discussion of Apostle. So we will take a brief intermission and we'll be right back. All right, we are back and we are going to jump into our spoilerific plot discussion. So the movie starts with a voiceover of a young woman who later we find out's name is Jennifer, reading a letter that she had sent to her father, basically saying that if she is to survive, he, being her father, must travel there with the means to purchase her freedom. So basically she's being held for ransom by someone that we don't quite know yet. So we cut to the father who's sitting slouched in a chair in front of a large fireplace with the following printed above it: "The power of his resurrection lies in the touch of his suffering." Not really sure if that has anything to do with anything, but I just thought it was interesting that it sat atop the fireplace.
It's religious. Just throw it in there.
Yeah, exactly right. I didn't want to go too deep on that. Next, we find out that Jennifer's brother, Thomas, who is portrayed by Dan Stevens, is at odds with his father, and the other man. So do you know who this other man was? It was like someone like maybe his father's assistant or something.
I like to fancy him as a solicitor, but I have no idea.
Well, his father's solicitor is encouraging Thomas to put his issues aside with his father as his sister needs him now. He is instructed to blend in with the flock as they won't be expecting him and not to pay the ransom until he sees Jennifer alive. He then refers to the people that are there as blasphemers, a cult, a disease. So we then cut to Thomas on a train. He takes his first dose of laudanum after reading the letter on the train. He then hides a razor in his pocket that, of course, we will see later. And then we cut to a boat being boarded. The worker on the boat makes it clear that no corrupting material from the mainland is allowed, and they must have their tickets. The ticket reads that he is traveling to Arisden. Is that how you pronounce it, Arisden?
I completely overlooked that detail, so I do not pronounce it.
No pronunciation.
You just make up your own. That's fine.
We'll go with that. So yeah, so his ticket reads that he's traveling to Arisden, and there is a red smudge on it, which we don't quite know why. He looks at the man's ticket ahead of him, and it is without the red smudge. So Thomas obviously knows what this red smudge means, so he creates a little diversion and he switches out his ticket with the man in front of him and promptly boards the boat. When the man in front of him boards the boat, the worker marks a white X on his luggage, which we will find out why he did that in just a little bit. So they're on the boat, and a woman immediately comments to Thomas about how she hasn't seen him at any prayer meetings. And I think Thomas responds with something like, well, I haven't seen you at any prayer meetings either. So,
Uno reverse card.
Ooh, Uno reverse. That's good. And then oddly enough, I don't know quite how this boat is built, but there's like is it a lamb? I think it's a lamb or a goat. Some
There's a
sort of
baby
like
goat.
a baby goat like falls onto the floor where they're sitting, and this man just quickly throws it out into the water and
Ugh.
kills it. It's like a very strange thing. And I actually read an interpretation of this that they're throwing away standard religion, with the Lamb of God being a symbol of Christianity.
I didn't think of that because I don't have the pretend English degree that I've imaginarily bestowed upon you. But
I don't either, but that Wikipedia taught me that, or somewhere maybe Reddit taught me that.
I
So
have to say, at first, I'm really pissed at Thomas for surreptitiously trading identities with that old man because like bad shit's gonna happen. But then the old man turns out to be the baby goat killer. So fuck that guy.
oh, was it the same guy? Okay.
Yeah.
So he deserved what's coming to him.
Uh,
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe just a slap on the wrist. I don't know.
It's hard to decide what people deserve.
Yeah. Anyway, they arrive at a picturesque rocky seaside village, and they're all walking up a hill. It looks really beautiful, beautiful scenery. And we see a series of large crosses that turn out to be kind of like the bows of a boat on land. And as they enter the village, the intake procedures begin, and a man does a quick physical check of each person's health, and then they are asked a series of questions. And I think the questions have to do with what they're going to kind of like contribute to the society, or like what they have to bring to this, this religion, as well as if they have any, I think, convictions or any prosecutions or something. They're basically just getting a background on all these people that are joining this town, as I understood it.
Did not remember any of that. I just remember they got checked for lice and like somebody looked in their eyes.
And then we cut to Thomas going into his room, and there's a religious text sitting on the table that's called The Word According to Prophet Malcolm, Father of Erisden. So we start to get a little glimpse.
Is that in the Library of Congress by any chance?
I think so, yes. It's a very important text. He meets a young woman named Andrea Howe, played by our very favorite Lucy Boynton, on the way to church. And they have a bit of a touch of flirtation before she runs off to church. There's a lot of these little flirtations throughout the movie that I thought were kind of charming. I don't know.
Is that what that is? Okay.
I thought so, right? Was that a bit of did you get that vibe?
No, but that's not what I'm looking for. So.
Oh, that's what I'm looking for, and I'm finding it. I will say anytime that Thomas and Andrea are on screen together, I think it's just probably the best parts of the movie for me. I think those two are just fantastic. I'm just going to throw that out there now. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely picked up when Willow was flirting, so I should get credit for that.
When Willow? Oh.
In The Wicker Man. Sorry.
I was thinking of a character in this movie named Willow.
I was just looking back to see like where the flirting was that I could remember.
Willow's not terribly subtle in her flirtatious manner. A little heavy-handed. So next we see Thomas actually looks over and sees a group of men in dusters. Would these be called dusters, these coats? I feel like that's like a trench coat kind of thing.
I feel like that's a word that definitely means some kind of coat. So
yeah, we're going to go with dusters. A group of men in dusters carrying the lifeless body of the man that Thomas had earlier switched tickets with. So then we go to church, and we get our introduction to the church leader, Malcolm Howe, who was preaching about how he was persecuted, called a traitor when he built the movement, and him and two others, Frank and Quinn, were cast away to the sea, landed on the island, and were beckoned by the goddess of the island who saved them. So we start to get a little bit of the backstory of, these three men, how this whole island came to be.
Do we think it's true, though? Because I just felt like they were con men, and I don't know if I buy any of that. Like, it could just be a myth that they were making up.
It sounds very fantastical. It's a question of, do they believe it, I guess, or do they make it up for malicious reasons, like many religious figures? But yeah, the relationship between these three characters is probably the most compelling part of this movie, at least in my mind. And it starts pretty early on. Even in these church scenes, you start to see some of the dynamic between the three of them. So Thomas is sitting in the pews. He looks out the window and sees kind of a creepy woman walking past the window outside the church. Malcolm continues to ask,
"Where is the land which has no call for wars? Arms Money?
No taxes?
Well, our land is here.
Basically saying you've come to the promised land, all of that stuff that taints the mainland or the rest of the world, you're free from that. We don't have any of those issues here.
Are these
Big red
guys
flag.
libertarians, or is this like a commune? I couldn't figure that out.
I was thinking more commune with the way that some of the stuff shakes out later, but I could see either way. Either way, big red flags. Or anyone that's going to promise you all these things, there's going to be a cost.
Sure. Yeah.
After the service, Thomas investigates the area of the church where he saw the woman, and we see kind of like living vegetation that is moving and growing, kind of like a vibrant green. Again, you don't get a lot of vibrant colors in this, so when they use them, there's a reason why they're using them.
Yeah. So right there, we know there's something supernatural in this movie, which distinguishes it completely from The Wicker Man.
Yes. Yeah, good point. And it's just a little touch of the supernatural, which I appreciate. They don't play their hand too quickly.
At all.
We now cut to the scene where the three founders, again, Frank, Malcolm, and Quinn, are questioning the badly beaten man, thinking that he is the one that's coming to save Thomas's sister with the money because his ticket had the red mark on it. And after a little bit of back and forth, Quinn just goes and slits his throat. This is the scene where I feel like you really get to know these three characters because Quinn has no qualms about just slitting this guy's throat like without a moment's notice.
Right.
And you can actually see Malcolm and Frank kind of gasp or like be taken aback when this happens. So you can already tell that Quinn's very brutish. He's very like, he's going to bring just a hammer to any problem, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas Malcolm and Frank, especially, are very much more timid, I would say, compared to Quinn, which comes into play a bit later.
Also, this is where I'm like, yeah, these guys are just criminals. Like, this is exactly what it looks like. They kidnapped somebody. There's no other explanation,
Yeah, it looks almost like how the mob would shake someone down. It's like just that, yeah, just not above board, really. Next, we are introduced to our young couple, Jeremy and Fionn, who are lying near the water discussing their bright future. And it's really kind of cute and sweet. They're just a young couple who are going to have, they're planning their future and the house that they're going to have and all this. And then they go ahead and have sex. And do you think they used birth control? I don't know.
Is that something they provide in the commune?
Oh, I'm sure they do. So as nighttime comes, there is a call to quarters, which I assume is basically just like a
curfew.
A curfew, yeah. And Thomas peers in a window and sees a man cutting a willing woman's arm to obtain her blood. He peers in another window and sees Malcolm leaving his house. And Thomas sneaks around and runs into Jeremy and Fionn. This is kind of a weird relationship between Thomas and then mostly Jeremy, I guess. And it's a very kind of he kind of blackmails him a little bit into helping him. So he's basically saying like, oh, what are you doing out here? I don't know. What are you doing out here? Well, I'm going to need your help later at some point. So
yeah, love how Thomas enlists the help of poor Jeremy basically by blackmail.
Yeah.
Would this be a good time to ask, who do you think is more likable, Thomas or Sergeant Howie?
Ooh, I have to put my feelings for Dan Stevens aside.
I know. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm going to go with Howie, I think.
Yeah. Thomas is not all that nice.
No, he's an enigma. His character in this is so odd because he's clearly strung out. He's got like major PTSD. He's dealing with a super stressful thing of his sister being missing, and he's just like out of his mind the whole time. He reminds me kind of like of Hunter S. Thompson a little bit in like Fear and Loathing, the way he like composes himself, where he's just like off his rocker and stumbling around and like saying really quizzical things. Yeah, I wouldn't really consider him as likable. I don't know. What do you think?
I have more to say about like why his character is that way, but later on, like when I think it's revealed.
Okay, we'll get there. So after meeting Jeremy and Fionn outside, Thomas enters his living corridors and sees mason jars with blood placed in front of each door. His is empty. So he proceeds to pour some from another into his own, and then as he puts his key in the door, he cuts his finger on it, and his blood drips on the floor outside his room, through the floorboards to some sort of creature below who's lapping it up. What'd you think of this scene?
I didn't ever like figure out what was happening there.
Did he cut himself on the key? They kind of like, there's like a like a sharp part on the key or something.
I knew it was an accident, but I didn't see how it happened.
Yeah. It just seemed very convenient. Like he got around shedding blood by pouring some blood in another one. Then he's like, "Oh crap,
Yep.
cut my finger." Well,
Yeah.
all that was for nothing.
Yeah. He doesn't even have any idea what the blood is all about yet. But like even when we find
Right.
out what it's about, I still don't understand who that was under the floor.
I assumed it is who we meet later as the supernatural type person, but without giving too much away yet. I don't know.
But there's some logistical challenges to that, I think.
It also surprises me as Thomas goes throughout this movie, he seems to catch on to things very quickly. Like even the blood stuff, like he quickly just goes and like dumps someone else's blood in his, like
Yeah.
without second thought. Yet meanwhile, he's like strung out and like you can see it in his eyes. He's got like manic eyes. Like I don't know, it's just his character doesn't seem like the type that would pick up on things very quickly or would act super rationally. And he kind of does for most of the movie.
I think he's hyper vigilant probably because of his trauma that he
Mm,
reveals so much later,
okay. That
like
could be
hours from now.
so many hours. This is
That's
a
how,
5 hour
that's how
movie,
I feel
people.
about that movie. I'll be honest. It's
No,
so
that's
long.
fair. It's a long one. All right, so after the blood through the floorboard scene, we get Thomas in his room and he begins jotting down a crude map of the living spaces. So clearly he's trying to figure out getting a lay of the land, trying to, hatch some sort of plan that we'll find out a little bit later. So we then cut to a large barn with a cellar door outside of it, and Malcolm goes inside while a mysterious figure shuts the door behind him. We'll learn more about that later as well. Next morning, Thomas wakes up and we see that his back is full of deep cuts, scars, and a cross branded on it. So we get our first inkling that he has some sort of traumatic past of some sort. Next, the young man, Jeremy, comes into his room, tells him it's time for work. Jeremy questions him about why he was outside. Thomas comes back and asks him the same. Again, same idea, the reverse Uno card. And he begins manipulating Jeremy to use him for his own purposes. Thomas shows Jeremy a picture of his sister, asking if he's seen her, and Jeremy kind of freezes up. Turns out that she was on the same boat with Jeremy, and Jeremy advises Thomas not to pay the ransom. And then Thomas blackmails Jeremy into being his confidant so as to not tell anyone of Jeremy's relationship with Fionn. So, yep, these two are now co-conspirators, we'll say. We then cut to the three men, again, Quinn, Malcolm, and Frank, delivering a stillborn calf.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah, well, they delivered a calf and they kind of like throw it in the corner. It looks lifeless, which I think this speaks to them being their rations or their
Agriculture
whatever
is
starting
not
to
working out.
dwindle.
Yeah.
Right. Everything from the top down is starting to have some issues. And I'm assuming that's because the animals aren't getting proper nourishment. They're not able to deliver
That's
healthy
what it is.
babies.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just a quick scene of them again delivering, I think it's a stillborn calf. Next, we get Fionn confiding in Andrea, asking about whether Fionn might be pregnant. And we find out that she likely is, as she last bled during the winter months, which is just a very old, fun way of saying that. During the winter months.
I'm going to say that next time I go to the doctor.
I believe it was during the winter months. Thank you for asking. So next is a really interesting scene. All the new arrivals are directed to the church, and they're chided for going out at night after the night bell. So they are all directed to kneel and are made to recite scripture from memory.
This is so
And
tense.
I put I'm getting flashbacks to the pop quizzes I used to get in like confirmation class where they'd had
God.
similar thing without the, violence and stuff like that. But yeah, very tense scene. I really liked this one. The man next to Thomas pulls a knife on Malcolm, and Thomas quickly steps in to defend him, demonstrating his false allegiance. So this was a very smart move by Thomas.
Very quick
And
thinking.
I was just gonna again another really quick thing. He did a very smart thing, and yet he seems out of his mind. So yeah, like you said, maybe he's just got a very sharp mind for this type of stuff. The guards impale the man with 3 spears, which I'm like, that is gnarly. This was
That
just
was a
such a
good
cool
kill.
scene. Yes, I agree. And then seeing that Thomas was stabbed, they immediately get him medical care from Andrea. And Malcolm does the old blood brothers handshake, which I'm like, you
Yeah.
cut your hand and you share the blood. especially back in 1905. I'm sure that had
Ugh,
no health consequences at all.
not at all.
You know, not at all. As Thomas recovers in Andrea's care, we learn that Andrea's mother died giving birth to her, and she seems to think that her father Malcolm resents Andrea for that. So it kind of gives you a little bit of insight into their relationship. You don't hear too much about that, I feel
She's
like.
so
But
quick to defend him other times, though.
yeah, she is. She's a very interesting character throughout this movie. She goes ahead and feeds Thomas some more tincture. And again, there's kind of a flirtatious moment. Did you catch it here at least? I feel like there was a little bit
No.
of, no, come on, have a heart. I mean, she's like dropping the dropper on his tongue. It's very like,
I was like, when is this going to get scary?
oh, well, we'll get there.
I know. After the 1 hour mark, that's the answer.
After doing this, you can tell she kind of starts to suspect something with Thomas. She kind of like gives him a look. I think when he like leaves her house or whatever, she kind of looks at him funny. And then we get a call to quarters as they march Jennifer through the town in an effort to weed out the co-conspirator. Basically, they call on the co-conspirator to make good on the debt that she owes. Quinn grabs her and cuts off some of her hair. I thought this was a very strange flex. Is that what you saw too?
I'm not sure.
Like, so they're like marching her through the town and like trying to make an example of her. Totally get it. And he just like grabs her hair and just kind of like cuts some of her hair off, which I'm like, I don't want them to do anything bad, but like you would think they would like, I don't know, like cut a finger off or something to like, you know.
So it's just like a demonstration?
Yeah, basically trying to scare whoever the co-conspirator is into coming forward.
Okay.
You know, basically being like, we're getting desperate. Let's show you what the consequences will be if you don't bring us the ransom. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of strange. Then we have Thomas looking desperate at his bottle of laudanum as if he's jonesing, and then he smashes it on the floor. And I'm like, no, don't do that. That's your superpower.
Poor Thomas.
That's your spinach.
No, right?
Then at this very intense moment, my Netflix cut to a Tom Brady commercial.
What? How come your Netflix has commercials?
Fuck you, Netflix. Yes, they added him in.
I got rid of
God damn
Netflix
it.
a while ago, probably right after I finished this movie.
It pissed me off. And this was like such an intense moment in the movie. And I'm like, come on. Anyway, moving past the Netflix debacle, Fiona is in the outhouse checking to see if she's pregnant with a mirror while her father, Quinn, peers in through a hole.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to need you to hold on a second.
Yeah.
Ew. Why, first of all, what's his name? Quinn?
Quinn.
Why is he even watching his daughter in the outhouse? This bothers me so much. And
Yeah.
this movie loses me here. Okay, like why would he do that? First of all, but also like why is
When? Where?
she has that's a little hand mirror, right? And she's looking at her
Yeah.
exterior lady parts.
Yep.
So is there some kind of old-fashioned way that you're supposed to know that you're pregnant? Did you find out?
Did Andrea tell her something earlier when Fiona confided in her? Did she maybe give her some sort of idea, maybe?
I think that's true, but I don't think we know what the idea is.
Yeah, I don't know. They may have left that out. I think we're just supposed to think she's very young and like doesn't really know what's going, like
but this is like,
she's in over her head and doesn't really know what to do with this.
This is like the pregnancy test moment, except that
right.
It's not a pregnancy test. And like, how can she tell? I mean, she can't,
Yeah.
she's just guessing, but how can her father tell? That's the better question.
Has he had any indication up to this point?
I don't think so. Like,
yeah.
Have we seen him looking suspicious or anything like that?
I'm going to have to go back and look at that because I thought there was something, but if there isn't, that's really weird that he was just looking in on her then.
It seemed out of the blue to me.
Yeah.
But then I missed all the flirting too. So it's possible I missed another like glaring glance.
That's okay. That's why there's two of us. I find the flirting, you find the
Perfect.
creepiness. Yeah. Well, the other weird thing about this is, so he peers in, you see his like eye. It's like classic, like just kind of silly scene, really. And then the floor creaks and he quickly puts his hand over the hole. Like, yep. It just seemed kind of comical to me. It's like, is that what you would do? Ugh. Like, I would probably duck or just quickly walk away.
You would not be in this situation.
Well,
that's
yes,
the answer to that.
Yes, I don't often look in outhouses. Anyway, yeah, weird scene, but yeah, Quinn starts to suspect something clearly at this point. We then cut to Jennifer, who is chained up in the town center for the youths to poke and jab at. Malcolm looks out pensively, and I put my notes. I feel like he's beginning to rethink things. You start to get these glimpses of him, and I don't think he's like totally off board, but I think he's looking out and kind of being like, what have we become, kind of?
Mm.
And it only lasts a second because then we find out that they're going to have a celebration tonight. And Malcolm tells Quinn that during the celebration, they will search everyone's room for the money and that this ends tonight. Andrea takes pity on Jennifer, bringing her food, advising her to eat slowly so that her body does not reject it. And she promises Jennifer that she will make sure no one will harm her, which I thought was very sweet. Just more points for Andrea being awesome.
Andrea's best character so far.
Absolutely. Thomas has a plan that involves Jeremy telling Jeremy to be ready. Be ready for what? We'll find out. Next, we have the town's Gothic hoedown, which just looks awesome.
Okay. Oh my God. Are you going to say anything about the music? Did you notice that they're like playing like American sounding blues that haven't even been invented yet? Like, I mean, not the way that they're playing. Like, how is this happening? Where is this from?
Maybe that it did seem out of place. I couldn't put my finger on it. Yes.
It's bluesy.
Really strange. Yeah, it did not fit the location or time period of this movie, but that's okay. So then we get a really strange scene. Thomas leaves his room and a person in a creepy mask is standing at the end of the hallway, perhaps a child. Thomas pantomimes shooting him and the kid playfully runs away. So I put, was this filmed solely for the trailer? It just looks like a trailer moment. So of course I go look at the trailer, of course, because this has no bearing on the movie. It doesn't really make any sense, but it's really effective in the trailer. So yeah, there's that. Next, we have Thomas has a flirtation with Andrea. Now, you must have seen this one. So he goes out to the Gothic hoedown and he sees Andrea and she kind of grabs his hands and comments about how those are not the hands of a scholarly man, and then comments on how his eyes have seen some things.
This is my favorite line.
Your eyes. They've seen things. Who are you?
I think that is as close as we get to any kind of comic relief because this line made me laugh. Like you've seen things. Like you could tell by somebody's eyes that they've seen things. I mean,
his eyes are beautiful. I don't know if I'd say they've seen things, but they're nice looking.
Yeah.
They're like little, like
she's reaching.
Water.
She's
reaching, yeah. And he reaches out to her and puts his hand on her hip. So again, the flirtation, are you seeing it now, Stacey?
I didn't even remember that happened.
Oh my gosh. You have like a flirtation sensor on your brain, I think. Block it all out. Next, we have Thomas and Jeremy crawling under the porch to enact their plan. So it's the porch of the living quarters, and they begin breaking the bricks into the basement. And I thought it was kind of cool. They start breaking the bricks to the rhythm of the song so as not to attract attention. It's kind of like an old prison thing, you know? You try to I think when they broke out of Alcatraz, they did this. The same thing where you use the hammer every time someone makes a loud noise. Then we cut to Quinn and Malcolm are flipping rooms, and as they're about to leave Thomas's room, Malcolm bends down and conveniently sees Thomas's map dangling from the drawer.
And I'm like, finally, something's going to happen.
Yes. But it's the most ham-fisted way of having this thing happen. Like he peers up and he's like, oh, what is that?
It's landed in his
we're just
lap.
about to leave this room.
Like, was it on purpose?
Oh, interesting.
Because
see, that would be more.
Thomas knew shit's going to go down.
Ooh, okay. So maybe it's smarter than I give it credit for.
I don't know.
It's a Netflix movie. So they yell at Frank to go check the house. Meanwhile, Thomas is in a dark underground hallway as Jeremy gets pulled out by his father, Frank, and told to run off. So then Malcolm tells Quinn, I want him a prisoner in possession of answers, not a corpse. Again, showing you how Quinn tends to fix problems. He just goes and kills people. Where Malcolm's like, I'd rather question him. Again, showing the difference in these men. So Quinn tells Frank, if you see him, you shoot him. Simple. So next we get Malcolm, who is standing at the top of the ladder with a shotgun. And I think this is the ladder right outside the barn, if I'm not mistaken, kind of going underground. And this is a super tense and effective scene. So he's standing at the top of the ladder. The door is obviously closed going down the stairs. And Thomas is down there with the lamp. Obviously, Malcolm can't see everything, all the features because he doesn't do anything. So Thomas just kind of slowly turns away and goes down the small underground water channel that's underneath this. I don't know what this is. If it's just like a, what do you call it?
Is this the like
It's like a well.
kind of messed up water?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
is that later?
No,
Okay, 'cause
that's this. Yeah, he just kind
scary
of
thing
goes.
is coming soon.
It's like an underground waterway of some sort. I don't know.
It's like all like filled with stuff.
Yeah, it's your stereotypical grimy, feathery, bloody, weird water that no
Like
one knows.
town runoff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
town runoff, exactly. Meanwhile, Frank shows up at the bottom of the same ladder that Thomas was just at the bottom of, and Malcolm shoots him, but thankfully misses Frank. And Frank is like, "What the hell are you doing?" Thomas crawls through the sewer that is full of blood and carcasses, as far as I could tell.
Ugh.
And a woman comes up from underwater and begins chasing him, shrieking.
And she's scary. She's not just any woman.
She's a
She's
a special woman.
Scary effects. Yeah.
He escapes into an underground cave-like place with religious drawings on the wall.
Is this a good place to mention that? Did you know Dan Stevens supposedly does all his own stunts in this movie?
No, I love him even more. This is like when we were
I know,
talking
right?
about the guy in The Wicker Man. Like everything I learned about him, I just love him more.
Right.
Just good peeps. This whole scene, I don't know. This seems so I don't want to say cliche. It's very tropey. Like the
I was so happy when the scene happened. I was like, yes,
yeah,
it's
I mean, I
scary
agree. I
now.
agree. It adds a new element, but just like the crazy, weird looking woman popping out of like an underground thing, it's like barbarian or like there's any number of things where that kind of thing happens.
Sure.
I mean, it's effective. Obviously, you got to progress the story somehow. But anyway, so yeah, he's in the underground cave-like place with religious drawings on the wall. And we cut to a woman wrapped in tons of vines and plants. Malcolm walks in and begins talking to her about how she showed herself to Thomas and that Thomas is not to be trusted as he will not worship her. He then cuts his hand and feeds her his blood. A man in a wicker mask. I don't know if this was a.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it is. It's a wicker mask, and
Ah.
it had to have been a nod to the Wicker Man. A man with a wicker mask on his head who is referred to as the Grinder
The
on
Grinder.
IMDb, which I didn't know what to call him in my notes. I think I called him like a monster or mysterious man, so I had to go back through and put the Grinder on there. He basically is the keeper of the goddess, who is the woman encased in vines. And he enters the frame and is dragging Jennifer in a bag and strings her up.
Can I just say the Grinder is so he's got the mask, which is scary.
Yeah.
And then like from the waist up, he's covered in gore. Like he's been grinding. He's been doing his job. But then he's just wearing like regular work pants. Did you notice?
I did. It's almost like, does he go home at the end of the night and like takes his
English
mask off
trousers?
And, yeah, takes a shower and like hangs his wicker hat up and his work trousers, gets his pajamas on, and then the next morning he goes back out and does the same thing.
Be careful, can't get blood on the trousers.
It's a strange character, I gotta say.
So strange. And now this movie has everything. Like,
yes,
at first it was like not scary, and now it's got a supernatural thing that we don't know how it like astral projects or whatever.
Yes.
And it's also got a slasher character.
It just everything.
What is going on?
And it's not subtle about any of this. It just like throws it at you all of a sudden, which I gotta say I kind of appreciate in this kind of movie. So as the goddess is drinking the blood, the leaves begin to turn green. We'll see this over and over again. She's, fueled by blood and yada yada. The next morning, Thomas wakes up to Andrea saying, "You found it," referring to the cave that he's in. As he changes his clothes, Andrea sees his scars, and he then goes on to explain that he was a missionary who went to Peking. Is that how you pronounce it? Peking? Peking?
You think so?
Yeah, something. I'll edit it in. And was tortured for his beliefs and was branded with a cross. That scene was like, ugh, something about like branding someone that just like gives me chills up my back. Certain things like that. Thomas then says, "The promise of the divine is but an illusion. Nothing in this world is pure, except for Jennifer, my sister." So he's obviously just completely jaded with religion and he's over it.
This is the moment that I said I was going to say more about his character.
Sure.
He's now revealed himself to have like a singular purpose for being alive. I don't think he cares what happens to himself after he rescues her. He's got to do this one thing. That's it.
So was his sister part of this other missionary assignment?
I didn't think so.
Okay. Yeah, they weren't really clear about, like, I don't know what their relationship was. Like the two of their relationships, the two of them, their relationship to religion, I guess I should say. I don't know if
You probably said this, I now don't remember. But like he's like, she didn't abandon me at that time, and so I'm not going to abandon her now. So that makes me think like when he got back from China, like she took care of him while he recuperated,
Gotcha.
picked up a new addiction, that stuff.
And do we know, did she go to this island of her own accord and then was kept?
Nope, she did not.
She
He
was
says
taken?
it later on that she was taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we don't know
I
why.
think he might say it in this scene.
Oh, okay. Maybe I missed that. And was she taken for any specific reason, like her specifically?
For ransom. So either crime of opportunity or like they had staked her out.
They knew her father was
word?
rich, I
Not
guess.
staked her out, but yeah.
Okay.
Or knew or thought, who knows? But
Gotcha.
he's got the ransom money. I guess he has that at least.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I think they make it pretty clear that like they need money for food.
Right.
And they're three criminals. So
Yeah.
this is what they do. Yeah.
For being like the whole purpose of this movie, Jennifer is kind of a minor character in a lot of ways.
She really is. I didn't even mention her in the cast.
Until the very end, there's not even a scene with her and Thomas, really. And even then, there's not really like a super memorable scene with the two of them. You would think they'd like meet up in secret somehow, and like, nope, none of that. That's his mission.
Because there's too much else going on in this movie.
True.
For that.
All those subplots that, you talked about earlier.
All the more important characters.
Yes.
She's just a device. That's what she is.
So Andrea and Thomas continue to talk, and Andrea offers to help him, but he is, of course, skeptical given that her dad is Malcolm, the leader of this island cult. And we learn that the crops have become riddled with impurities, and Thomas says, perhaps something has angered her being the goddess, of course. Next, we cut to Fionn telling Jeremy that she is pregnant, and she's super excited, and Frank wants Jeremy to go to the mainland permanently. So Jeremy then asks Fionn to go with him, and they're going to start their life together. Again, more of this like head in the clouds, we're in love, we're going to start a family. It's really kind of sad, honestly. Does he propose?
Kind of. He's like, I want you to go with me to the mainland, pause, as my wife.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah, you're right. Kind of like an informal proposal.
We totally know none of that is going to pan out.
No, this is all just too sweet to end well. So her father, Quinn, watches on, visibly angry, and he then confronts Fionn and throws her to the ground, demanding that she tell him what she is hiding. Meanwhile, we have Malcolm confronting Frank on the dock as Frank's about to leave, and Frank tells Malcolm that he and his boy are leaving. Frank then says, "We have a god in chains poisoning us from the inside out." Basically saying the community is broken, the dream is over, get out. We then cut back to Fionn, who is crying out for her father's love, while he berates her for wanting to give birth to a, quote,
"a bastard mongoloid breed! No! To be born in lumps of twisted flesh no mother would ever call her own! No! Yes! Child!"
Wow, that's a sentence.
I think he also says it will kill her.
Yes. He is just pulling out all the stops here to make her feel really awesome.
And all this violence is very hard to watch.
This is
some people.
This scene is extremely effective, and like you said, it's hard to watch.
Thank goodness they cut away when they did. That's all I'm saying.
I know they could have really gone too far with this, and it would have I would have maybe had to fast forward, honestly. So he pulls a knife on her as Jeremy returns to the house. He sees her bloody, lifeless body on the floor, and Quinn sitting bloody in front of the fire. Quinn basically blames Jeremy for her death, saying, "You took her from me." So there's all sorts of fucked up stuff like this. To blame this young kid for the death of his daughter that he just murdered is just terrible. Jeremy tries to fight Quinn, who is like 3 times his size, and I'm like, where is this going? I assumed Quinn was just going to kill Jeremy right away, but he does something even worse somehow. and
Mhm.
stumbles out of the house screaming, saying that Jeremy killed his girl. He
Ooh, I
demands,
hate him.
oh,
He's such a villain.
he is so
Ugh.
bad, so bad. He demands that they prepare the heathen stand, and he is told that that can only be ordered by Malcolm, to which Quinn responds that he is now the divine ruler. And I think this is
Mm,
the big turning point in the film. I feel like that line right there, basically like, nope, I'm
yeah.
the new guy here. So
That's something the Wicker Man didn't have. Like nobody was challenging Lord
I mean,
Summerisle.
how are you going to challenge him? He's amazing. He's
That's
got a
true.
great voice. He's got a
He's
great
fun to hang out
great
with.
head of hair, great teeth.
He's a great conversationalist. He lives in a
Yes.
castle. There's none of this like
Ah,
shit and darkness.
you couldn't ask for a better leader. I mean, he could lead me. I'm fine with that.
Just
Anyway,
close your eyes during the sacrifices. You'll be fine.
that's true. Next, we have the soldiers find Andrea and Thomas and drag them back to town, and they start to construct the heathen stand as the villagers stand around wearing black, and it even looks like there's a few KKK members there. Totally
Oh
kidding.
my God. So why are pointy hats so scary on like a base instinctual level? Like I feel like I'm just as
Hmm.
afraid of them like the same way that I'm afraid of snakes. Like we're just born like that.
I've never thought about that.
Is that just me?
I just connect them to the KKK, which I don't know if I find scary, more kind of silly, but um,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you can imagine how they're scary for some
Sure.
people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean that yeah. Historically they're scary, but
I think maybe they chose that design like trying to look scary because I think it's just, you see those pointy hat people in that
mhm.
purification scene and it scared me.
Do executioners, like old time executioners, wear outfits like that? I feel like there's like an executioner outfit. And I'm trying to picture what that looks like, and I'm wondering if that's a pointy hat,
That's a good point. And then they
something
have
like
this
that.
idea that like witches had pointy hats.
Mm,
Maybe that's just gone back far enough in history that like we all genetically believe it. I don't know.
a shared, yeah, belief. I could see that. Pointy hats.
Maybe it's just because I saw The Wizard of Oz when I was too young,
Oh
and
God, that used to
I
freak me out.
Wicked Witch of the West was
Ooh,
really scary.
yeah, and the flying monkeys. Ugh. They don't even need pointed at hats, and they freak me out. I put my notes here, like the fact that they have to construct this device slowly adds even more suspense. Like the fact that it's a manual device that's not already set up, they only bring it out for certain occasions. It just adds to it. So they put Jeremy on the table while Andrea pleads with Quinn. And there's a really cool shot here. I feel like there's not a lot of really interesting visual stuff in this movie, but I really like this. It's a very quick shot from Jeremy's perspective of the blood starting to cloud his vision, and then you
Mhm.
start to see just clouds. And I thought that was a very interesting shot, kind of just showing it from his perspective, being put on this table and just being overcome by like fear and, just blood rushing to his
It's a
head.
difficult scene.
It is for sure. It's just brutal visuals. The drill starts to go into his head, and it's just super, again, everything's super slow because it's all very manual. It's just a hand crank, which makes it just that much worse. And it's just, oh,
And they don't show like that much.
they are
I think
very
they do
smart
they
with what
do a
they
lot
show.
with yeah, with
Yes.
judicious like biding their time
Hmm.
and even like the sound effects that
Ugh.
are like subtle. Yeah.
Ugh.
Uh
I don't like it.
that's where the scare comes from.
Yes.
Like to me, even if I close my eyes, like I'm still gonna know what's happening.
Yep. All right. Check it off. It's a horror movie now, officially. It's no
Definitely.
longer the romance that I was making it out to be, with all the
Thank
flirtations.
goodness.
I thought it was a romantic comedy up until
Cuties.
this point. Yes, there you go. It's my favorite genre now. As he's doing this, Quinn then whispers in Jeremy's ears, or in his ear, "I've wanted this," which is just like,
Ugh.
oh, spine tingling. Those are the last words Jeremy heard before being put to this
So
horrific death.
Quinn's a psychopath, I think.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And I think his psychopathy just grows throughout this movie. Like, and this is like
Good work pronouncing that right
I
on the
had to
first
really think about
try.
that psychopathy. Yeah, I think this is like the apex of his psychopathy at this point. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think he was as crazy at the beginning of the movie, but I think he got a little bit of that power, and now it just all went to his head at this point. We hear horrible gurgling noises as Jeremy's body twitches as Quinn turns the wheel slowly. And I noticed there is one black villager in the background. And I said, "Yay, diversity."
No
Did you
way.
notice?
I did not.
And I think this movie
Now I
gets a
gotta go back and
pass
watch that scene.
because it's a Welsh movie from 1905. I don't know what the landscape looked like back then, but I just thought that was kind of nice.
I
They
don't care
included
when
it.
they mix it up and it's not historically accurate because,
Yeah.
like jobs for everybody.
Sure, absolutely. So then Quinn places a red rose petal in Jeremy's skull as a symbol of purity. Malcolm and Frank show up, and Frank is taken away clearly in anguish, and Quinn calls Malcolm a weak, false prophet. So the gloves are off at this point, and Quinn calls on Malcolm to prove himself by killing Thomas. Andrea pleads with her father to spare Thomas, and we hear a loud gunshot, which ends up being Frank. Thomas escapes, breaking the rod that I think he's got his arms up on. He's basically like hung up on this rod. And
Uses that as a weapon.
yes, and he kills 2 guards. And again, this is like one of those action sequences. There's like 2 or 3 of them in this movie that come out of nowhere, but they're awesome. And rather than fighting Quinn and Malcolm, Thomas runs off into a lush green forest, which I said, is this the only time we see vibrant color in this film? Because it's like,
wasn't that weird?
so weird. And I think I think there's a reason they used that, and I think they did a good job with it.
Maybe they should have been foraging in the forest the whole time.
Yeah, it looks super bountiful, honestly. Thomas then sees the goddess walking slowly in the forest, and he runs to the barn and sees Frank stumbling out with a gunshot wound in his stomach. His last words to Thomas are,
"Burn it all down."
Thomas enters the barn from underground, and Malcolm and Quinn start to square off. Quinn shoots Malcolm in the shoulder, and he falls into the underground hallway. Thomas then sneaks around and sees the top half of Jeremy's dismembered body. The grinder puts a funnel in the goddess's mouth and feeds her Jeremy's blood and guts to help sustain her. Pretty gross. Thomas then sees the burlap sack containing Jen hanging from a hook, and the grinder then whacks Thomas on the head, and a soldier takes Jen away as Thomas passes out.
This is a pretty tense scene.
Very tense. And the music in this movie is kind of forgettable, or the soundtrack, but there's this one moment here I thought was really smart. As he's starting to pass out, you get this like out of tune piano, and it gets more and more out of tune.
Oh, wasn't that cool?
Yeah, kind of signifying Thomas's like disoriented state. So there's not a whole lot of that in this movie. It's a very kind of boilerplate soundtrack, but I did like that little moment there.
It's a nice orchestral score.
Yeah, it's fine. It's
there's real string instruments.
You know what it is? It's like I almost didn't really notice it, so you can take that for good or bad, I guess. Next, we have Andrea praying in her room, and Quinn walks in holding handcuffs, implying that he is about to take Andrea away in handcuffs. Thomas is then on some sort of torture table with the grinder, who's cranking him into a grinder, which is probably where he got his name. He gets his hand crunched, which, the sound of like crunching bones and gears, I'm not a big fan of. He gets loose, but is then forced back in. He uses one of the hooks to attack the grinder, and then he escapes. He traps the grinder on the table and feeds him violently into the grinder. It's just a whole back and forth. I'm trying to like describe this scene, but really it's just a whole back and forth between him and the grinder. He gets the upper hand on the grinder, and might we say the tables have turned? The grinder tables had turned.
I like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
He redirects his attention toward the goddess, kneels down in front of her, and she puts her hands on his temples, like we've seen in so many movies, implying that she's about to impart some sort of knowledge or memories or wisdom to him, kind of telepathically. Again, it's a little tropey.
Silly.
Yeah, a little silly. We then get kind of a random flashback. And the only reason I realized at the time that this was a flashback is because Malcolm's hair is comically long and it just looks slightly out of place.
Good point.
Yeah. And in the flashback, Quinn and Malcolm come across the goddess, who is hunched over in the forest with a cloak over her, basically showing their initial meeting.
But we still don't know anything about her, like where she came from.
No. And honestly, I don't even know if you need this flashback. Like, I think we could just piece together that they found her and found a way to, utilize her. But anyway.
Hook her up to the island? Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know how they figured that out.
Right. Yeah, they kind of didn't include the correct stuff here. Meanwhile, we get kind of our last set piece here, which is Quinn has Andrea and Jennifer chained up in kind of like an open air, dilapidated building. And we get some exposition about how Quinn was responsible for utilizing the goddess. He's basically saying, yep, I was the one that figured this out. Basically saying, like, I should have been the leader of this whole thing all along.
Mm.
And Thomas,
Tell us how you really feel.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no shortage of words there. Thomas, meanwhile, looks like he's seen the light after being touched by the goddess. He takes Frank's earlier advice and burns it all down, first saying, "Forgive me," which is kind of comical.
Is it? It's kind of Wicker Man. Like, there's the homage
Mm-hmm.
right there,
Was that
if
in
you
The Wicker
will.
Man?
Well, I mean, the whole burning shit
Oh,
down.
yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Malcolm ascends the steps because Malcolm was down in the hallway, the underground hallway. He ascends the steps and sees the barn burning. Thomas escapes through the forest, looks up and sees all the guards impaled in the trees. I thought this was a very effective visual. Not sure it made like that much sense. I don't know. Is this like the goddess being angry or something, or trying to exact
Couldn't figure that
revenge?
out. Yeah.
Nah, doesn't make any sense, but I thought it was kind of a cool
Nope.
visual, if nothing else.
That's probably why they did it.
Yeah, that was actually also in the trailer. I noticed that as well.
Ah, now we know.
Plays well in the trailer. So next we have Quinn referring to the goddess not as a god, but as a machine, which I thought was very interesting. Again, his like very barbaric viewpoint of life. Not very subtle.
Malcolm. He was soft. When the blood of the animal stopped working, he tried to feed her himself. He fell victim to faith. He would have let us all starve. Instead of doing what needed to be done, instead of feeding her what she needed to be fed.
His plan is to keep Andrea and Jennifer prisoner, impregnate them regularly, and feed their offspring to the goddess, which I'm like,
isn't that horrifying?
that is
oh my God.
That's like the ultimate never-ending form of cruelty. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. Like on its
That
surface,
is-
it doesn't seem that bad, but when you stop to think about it for just like 2 seconds, you're like, that is
Mm-mm.
terrible.
To anyone listening to the words, that is truly the worst part of the movie.
What
Like
the
most horrifying part.
yeah, you think so?
I mean, in my mind, that is worse than the purification ritual.
Yep. I think I might tend to agree with you there.
Let's push that right out of our minds.
So after revealing this terrible, terrible plan of Quinn's, he then sees the town burning and decides to leave them to die. So thank God that plan was only going to be enacted for like a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas then comes in and fights Quinn. This is a weird thing. Quinn shoots the wall and there's something flammable on the wall that catches fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stone wall. I don't know what he shot or got really lucky and hit a candle or something. I don't know.
Maybe he's storing some ammo in there?
Yeah, just like a little cubby on the wall. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but it was kind of an action shot. Quinn jabs Thomas in the side a bunch of times with a knife where I'm like, Jesus Christ, could you imagine getting stabbed like a dozen times in the side, even with a small knife? Like, I'd be down for the count.
After the first stab, no, I have no idea. Yeah.
I've never
This
been
is
stabbed
horrible,
before.
I'm sure.
I'm just like, ouch, that's got to take your toll. But then Andrea gets free and strangles Quinn with the chains. And Thomas, this was a rather gory little detail. Thomas drags a knife the full way down Quinn's torso and slices him open from top to bottom, which I'm like, that is overkill, but he deserved
Kind of amazing.
it. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel too bad for Quinn there. So
No.
Quinn is now dead, and now we get to the point where they now need to flee the island. Thomas is in clearly rough shape after getting stabbed a whole bunch of times and everything else that happened to him. And he tells Andrea and Jennifer to leave and be the light that guides me to eternity, which I thought was kind of a nice little quote.
So he totally lost all his religion, but now he's either like got it back or he just wants Jennifer to have a nice memory of him.
Yeah, or he's just out of his mind on drugs and adrenaline and
But
whatever else
he's
is.
lost he doesn't have any more drugs.
Oh, well, maybe
that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Out of his mind on
It's the
what's it called?
withdrawal.
Thank you.
Yes, there you go. He's jonesing and like there's weird shit going on. Andrea and Jennifer get on the boat and they hear a scream and a structure crumbles, spilling blood everywhere. What was that? Did you?
I don't know.
Again, I feel like they just put stuff in this movie. Like it's like a building that's full of blood, and I don't think it wasn't the barn, like where, well, that was already burned down. So
did they have like a wine silo?
Oh, maybe it was wine. Maybe I'm just being too graphic thinking it was
wine,
blood.
though. You store it in barrels. Everybody knows that.
Right. You don't just like put it in a room. Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't matter. None of this really matters.
Maybe it was the blood storage. Maybe it was the blood thing where they dump all the cups of blood and then it
Oh,
gets funneled down to wherever for the,
the main blood reservoir. Yeah, that could be.
just still weird that there would be that much of it.
Yeah,
But
that's a lot of blood.
it doesn't stay fresh very long either.
Blood. No, you have to store it correctly. And I don't think they
Mhm.
had those methods back then.
No.
Now, so Thomas is lying on the ground, struggling on the grass, and Malcolm comes up to him. And Thomas looks down to where his blood is dripping on the ground and sees green leaves forming. He gets this crazy smile on his face as he looks over at Malcolm, lays down as his body is overtaken by grass and vines, to imply that he is the new guardian of the island. The end.
Questions. So is he the new guardian of the island because he had this special moment with the goddess and she transferred things into his brain? Or is just the first nice person to die after the goddess dies the one who the island didn't want Quinn. So how does this work? Please explain this religion to me.
Well, I know every detail about it because it's so clearly written into the movie.
Mhm.
I assumed it was the transfer of the goddess to him. I've seen that in a lot of
Okay.
movies and no one ever explains it
Yeah.
right. It's a convenient plot device. Like you're the chosen one. I'm imparting
The
everything
logistics of the astral projection also bothered me. Like, when she was chasing him
Mhm.
in the r- runoff bog,
Yeah.
like, could she have actually harmed him, or would she be like just a ghost that could like move through things and couldn't actually do any damage? Like,
That's a good question. Like if she had caught up with him, would she have actually done
I'm
anything?
so sorry that my hand motions can't be recorded into the podcast
I'll
because
put
I'm
some
really
like swiping sounds
pantomiming
like
here.
whoosh, whoosh,
Thank
whoosh.
you. Yes. That's great.
No, I have no idea. I don't think the writers knew either. I think it was just supposed to be scary.
Do they ever say the name of the movie in the movie? Because I kept waiting for that. And
No,
no.
not to my knowledge. I'll look up the screenplay later, do a little control F,
So
but
who was the apostle? Was it Malcolm? Because Malcolm's still alive. Was it,
right.
is it Thomas now? But Thomas is a god
Yeah.
because the other thing was a, goddess? Or was the apostle like sarcastic and that was like Quinn all along or something? Or alternate explanation.
Could it just be the changing of who the apostle was throughout? Like, so Malcolm was the original leader, and Frank and Quinn were kind of the apostles, I guess, right? They were like the
All right,
followers,
because
but in
apostles
command.
are followers. I forgot all about that. Yeah.
Right. So, but then it switches, of course, and Quinn becomes the leader. But no one's his apostle then because did Frank die?
Yes.
He did?
Yes.
No,
Did
he
he get
left.
wait, he was like burn it all down. And he had a
Oh, he
gunshot
got
wound.
shot. Yes. So he
Yeah.
died, and Malcolm, of course, wasn't going to be Quinn's apostle.
Right. So what's gonna happen now? Is Malcolm gonna like get the band back together, so to speak? Like he's like, I'm build this up again. I got a good thing going.
So he has to find a new grinder. He has to find a couple
Correct.
of other lackeys that are going to be kind of his second in command. And they're going to store Thomas in some sort of barn and feed him blood.
Do you think Malcolm has learned anything? I mean, will he do it better this time?
If I'm being honest, I think he's out of the game. I feel like he was really becoming jaded at the end. There was little hints of it that he was kind of being like, this isn't right. But I think his problem was it got too big. Like a lot of leaders where they get like, even if they want to get out, it's hard to get out because they built this whole thing and it like snowballs, And I think he's responsible for starting it. So he's like, I can't stop this thing now. I don't know.
Did this movie have any earnest comic relief whatsoever?
No, and that is
None at all,
that's
right?
part of my review. I can't think of a
That's hard for me to take.
I mean, some of Thomas's lines he kind of says in kind of a humorous, like grin kind of way, but they're not really like lighthearted necessarily. There's like nothing lighthearted in this movie.
You need a little bit of release here and there. And I mean, you have the regular tension release, but
Yeah.
it's not the same as getting a laugh like unexpectedly somewhere.
Right. Well, and even there's a scene in the pub early on And they like as the camera pans into the scene, you start to see like some musicians playing and like someone's kind of singing, and I'm like, oh, great, we're finally getting our Wicker Man
Mhm.
like, pub in,
Right.
this is gonna be great. And then they don't do anything with it. It's just like,
They probably edited it all
of
out.
course they did. Or like,
Probably got some good stuff in
even the
there.
Gothic hoedown, there's really not a lot of like joy to be had. There's just a bunch of people in creepy
Mm-mm.
masks, like kind of walking around
Yeah.
fire. It's
You can
like,
hear the music, but it's kind of far away
yeah, they don't
most of the
really,
time. Yeah.
yeah, there's not a lot of joy to be had in this movie at all.
Do you know if there were any alternate endings planned or possibly filmed for
No,
this
I
movie?
found nothing about this. Did you?
I did not
Yeah,
find anything either.
yeah. Well, how do you think the ending worked? Do you think it landed, or what would you change?
So, do I think the ending landed? I mean, sure. I guess Thomas makes it pretty clear to Andrea that like the quest of rescuing his sister is like the only thing on his mind.
Hmm.
It's the only thing keeping him alive. So his story arc is complete. It would have made more sense for him just to die, like from his wounds or whatever.
Right.
I don't really understand why he's the one now. He's the chosen one taking the goddess's place. I guess just happenstance, but that's not very satisfying. So, he barely had the will to live, and now
Right.
he's going to be he's going to live forever,
Well, and
so to speak.
did he help the goddess at all?
He burned her, immolated her,
Okay, so I guess that was his way
which,
of, yeah,
yeah, I think that's what she wanted.
like
I
ending
think
her
that's what she asked
suffering.
for. Like,
Sure.
yes, please. She said, set me free. And I don't think that meant, please trim my vines so I can run along.
Right, right.
Uh,
So maybe
yeah,
that was his act of kindness is what ultimately made
I
him the
believe
next.
it was a euthanasia. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you're probably right.
That makes
But
sense,
it's
I
still
guess.
kind of ironic that he's going to be like almost immortal now.
Right. After turning his back on all
Also,
things religion.
I think it's weird that Malcolm ended up still alive.
Hmm.
So it's not super satisfying,
No,
but we certainly we wouldn't want it to be any longer. So the
no.
fact that they wrapped it up is a plus. What do you think?
So the stuff with like Quinn, Andrea, and Jennifer, that whole, last scene initially felt kind of rushed and thrown in. Like it just seemed like kind of an afterthought, but ultimately, I think it kind of works in showing Quinn's desperate attempts to kind of keep the island alive. Like it just
Yeah.
shows his desperation. He's like, "Oh shit, what can I do now? I better go take these girls," And then he comes up with this
Hmm.
crazy plan that only lasts a minute. So he's
Yeah.
not really thinking straight. I think you kind of get that element of him. He's just running around wild trying to save something. I loved the scene with Malcolm coming across to Thomas on the hill. I feel like they could have really screwed this up by having Malcolm deliver like a long-winded speech about how he
Oof.
failed
Yeah.
the goddess and his people and how he had good intentions all along. But they didn't. I don't think he even says a word. I think it's just
Thank
silence, which
goodness.
I love
Yeah.
that because if he had done that, that would mean that the writers and directors didn't do their job throughout the movie. Because I think we get that throughout the movie. Like you can see that I feel a little bit for Malcolm, I have to say, as the film goes on. Because I think he truly is starting to see that he's really fucked up and that he can't stop this thing. And so I really like that last scene. But yeah, I don't know if I would have changed anything. I'm hoping they weren't trying to set this up for a sequel of some sort by having Thomas, laying down in the vines and having him be the do.
Couldn't imagine that. That's not a very good use of Dan Stevens.
No,
I mean, he wouldn't even really get to do that many stunts.
true. He would just be stuck in a web of vines the whole time, which is kind of lame. But anyway, yeah, I know. I thought it was good enough. I don't know how else I would have ended the movie, so well, I'll give it a passing grade, I guess.
Speaking of passing
Yeah.
grades, what on a scream scale of 1 to 5 screams, how would you rate this
Do I
movie?
get to go first?
I think so.
Okay. Um,
You do now.
well, okay, so I always have to like put little disclaimers when I give ratings, but part of me has to at least think about the Wicker Man when I'm giving this a rating because we just watched it and this is a descendant of the Wicker Man. So, for being a descendant of the Wicker Man, this movie could not be more different. Much of what made the original film so charming and effective is clearly missing here. Where the Wicker Man primarily takes place in the bright sun, the majority of Apostle is cast in darkness and clouds, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. The variety of music that walked us through the 1973 film is replaced with a very generic cinematic score, and the eccentric but effective performance of the late great Sir Christopher Lee is substituted with a non-threatening Malcolm and a very brutish one-note Quinn. So you're kind of getting some second-rate, equivalents in this film in my mind.
For
And
sure.
also, whereas in The Wicker Man, you get introduced to many of the villagers and you have a feel for the many aspects of the community and how everything's tied together. In this film, it's pretty much just limited to the scope of like a handful of people who are specifically involved in the various subplots. So it doesn't feel like a very lived in community in my mind. I didn't get that impression from how they filmed this.
Yeah,
However,
I did not.
there is a lot to also like about this movie. Dan Stevens' portrayal of a desperate, drug addled, dealing with PTSD, trying to save his sister from an evil cult, is greatly entertaining, if not a little over the top at times. We also get our first alum, Lucy Boynton, who I think is absolutely fantastic in this film. I may say she even steals the film altogether.
She definitely carries it at some point.
Absolutely. And she provides like this grounding presence throughout, and she truly sees things for what they are. I think everything she says is pretty accurate. She knows what her father is doing, what he represents. She knows pretty much everything that's going on. And she's great for exposition. I think that is kind of one of her great roles there, is kind of giving you insight into the island. And I think she does a great job with it. This movie is, I would say, pretty well paced for being over 2 hours long, which is a tough thing to do. It sets up the premise super quickly in the first scene, and it doesn't really let up until its great conclusion. There's not a lot of like needless monologues or, stuff like that. I think they just kind of jump from one plot to the next, and I was engaged throughout. Normally when I'm watching a movie, I'll kind of like see where I'm at and be like, okay, we've got a half hour left, 20 minutes. This one, I don't think I even looked at once, and I was like surprised to find that it was over 2 hours. So it flew by in my mind, really well paced, some good performances. I give this 3 out of 5 screams. How about you, Stacy?
Okay. Wow. That was higher than I expected. But you made a lot of good points. First of all, this movie is just like not my thing. I mean, it's got to be a lot of people's thing though, because it gets pretty good reviews.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you looked.
I
I looked
did. I think
after
was
I
it
was
6,
excited.
6.8 or something. I don't know on IMDb. I have to double check, but
On Rotten Tomatoes, I think it may have been around 80%, which is really high for a horror movie.
it's 6.3 on IMDb. So yeah, that's anything over 6, I think, is pretty decent IMDb for like a horror movie.
It's got a lot packed into it, and I
Mhm.
didn't think all of that belonged. And it's very long. And I was not as patient about the pacing as you were, because I was definitely looking at the time going by, and I was like, nothing scary has happened. Nothing scary has still happened. But I don't know, like maybe that's different expectations. Like I wasn't particularly enjoying the drama. So that has a lot to do with it.
Mhm.
It has a little bit of supernatural stuff, which I like, but it ends up being not very much fun supernatural stuff. Like the supernatural thing is basically a prisoner who can do a couple of scary things. But like, who even is the goddess? I wanted to know more about that. And apparently the island is just magical and can make anyone into a god or goddess or non-binary deity.
Mhm.
And then it's got this like slasher side character who is like a pretty scary character, and he only gets scenes when it's convenient for like the other character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the Grinder could have been its own movie.
Well, and also like I feel like that, not to step in too much, but like they could have explained him as like being the goddess's son or something, like something.
Something.
Yeah.
So like being the god or goddess is like not that interesting if anyone can do it, first of all. I already said first of all, so that's second of all.
Mhm.
And like I said, nothing scary happens for over an hour, so I dinged it on the score for that. Granted, I really liked the first scary scene where the goddess chases Dan Stevens doing all his own stunts in the gross water. Another issue, I don't find this cult all that believable. Like, okay, cult leaders are supposed to be charismatic.
Mhm.
And like, I just don't buy that those three guys who can't even get along with each other through any of the hardships could like hold it together long enough to build all that, plus attract all those people, converts in droves. Maybe all the charisma is happening on the mainland. I mean, there's like prayer meetings. We don't even, who's running those. We don't know.
Right.
But there's a lot that they built with all those tunnels and everything. And like, can you imagine all that construction?
Yeah.
And agriculture, which we never really see happening, but we know it's there. Also, like on a completely different note, it's like a very patriarchal and sort of reactionary kind of society compared to other cults that emerged around that time. I mean, you might think that's like over 100 years ago, but like about 2 years ago, I read a whole lot of books about cults in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And I'm not saying that any of them were like exemplary little utopias or anything. Honestly, I'm not even saying I remember that much about what I read, but like they certainly seemed more enlightened. And some of them were even fairly democratic and egalitarian, if I remember correctly. I don't know, just didn't seem, it seemed a little out of time to me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like what you said about the 3 founders, I mean, I would not picture them as the type to create what was appeared to be created in this film. It's just I don't buy it. Malcolm just fell flat with me. I didn't fear him. I didn't like believe he didn't really have a whole lot of what's the word? Like charisma. Like there's just nothing. And Frank, I mean, he's kind of a non-character, really. I mean, he's just kind of he's on the periphery, really, and so he's a nothing. And then Quinn is just a crazy, crazy guy. I mean, it's just they don't have the brains or the organizational skills. It doesn't appear to.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
And if they were smarter, perhaps they could fake some charisma,
Right. Yeah.
Or make the religion seem more attractive, because I don't even see, of course we arrived in a bad time.
Sure.
Could you imagine just uprooting your life and moving there because there's no taxes?
I mean, it must be terrible on the mainland. That can be the only thing. It's got to just be barbaric and just awful and like disease.
I don't think it was, though.
Yeah,
this is the 20th century.
I don't know.
But anyway, bottom line, I gave it some credit for some fine acting from people we've mentioned, even the characters we don't like. I did think, like, even though it was very dark all the time, I do think the visuals were good, and like the setting and all that. It was a good atmosphere for a scary movie. So I gave it a 2.5. So that's 3 screams out of 5 for Apostle.
That was our average?
What do you think? That's the average, yeah. Because you gave it a 3.5, right?
No, I gave it a 3.
But, dang it.
You were doing your math so well.
I talked too long and then I forgot what you
said.
So
it's a 3 and a 2.5. So that's 5.5. Yeah, 2.75.
It's 2.75. Yeah.
I think that.
So that might be our lowest one.
I think so. After our highest one, which just goes to show.
Yeah.
There's just something about how this film looks that is very unappealing to me, I think, in my opinion. Even like the opening scene where there's like a sweeping shot of like the bridge and the train, it looks so CGI. Like it is just.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
I think I'm like less sensitive to that.
Okay. I see it a lot and it drives me crazy. It just was not appealing to look at. There's nothing in my mind that was that appealing in this movie. I just thought the cinematography was very boring.
I notice CGI when it's like monsters.
Oh, interesting.
I notice it. Yeah.
Okay.
I very much like practical monsters.
Yes.
So that's it for Surf and Sacrifice, which I will say a third time. It's now time to wave goodbye to the eerie isles and creepy cults as we beach our boats far away from Summer Isle and whatever that island in Apostle is called.
Arisden.
Sure. We've navigated the foggy shores of fanaticism, uncovering the dark secrets and fiery faiths that tie these culty cuts together. But hold on to your beach hats. Our journey is taking a turn towards sunnier, yet still terrifying shores. As we set our curious sights on the sandcastles of cinematic slip-ups prepare to dive deep with us on a couple box office bombs on the beach. That's the category, okay? It's box office bombs that take place on the beach. We're swapping sacrificial flames for flip-flops and movies that performed very, very badly. Very badly. Will these films be washed up wonders or buried treasures lost in the sands of time? Grab your popcorn and we'll be soaking up the rays and dismays in our next 2-part tidal wave of an episode. Stay tuned, and remember, not all treasures make a splash at the box office, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth watching. Also, don't forget your sunscreen because, it's the beach and all, and it's just a good idea.
Very true. Any parting words before we close out this episode?
Those were my parting words.
Well, then I will do my parting
good.
words and say, please like and follow us on all of our social medias, and
leave us a review. How
leave
about
us
that?
a review too. Yes. Yeah, that too. And we'll see you next time. Stay scary.
See ya.